Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Environmental Impact Assessments, and in today's lecture we are going to look at how we undertake cumulative impact assessment. This will undertake within the larger umbrella of EIA methods, so we'll see what kind of things are taken care in while we deal with cumulative impact assessment. So the key reference for us for this particular session is chapter 19 from the book Terrible and Woods. And moving forward into this, we had already seen that what is cumulative impact. We had seen certain examples of that as well. So today we're going to look into the methods part and certain guidelines which are available and examples of how it is undertaken. So just to recap, what is cumulative effect assessment? It's said to be a systematic procedure where we identify and evaluate the significance of the effects from multiple activities within the framework of EIA process. So the key thing which we need to understand here is impact effects from multiple activities. So just not the project, but a range of projects or other things which will go in and around the place of your concern. So that is what we talk about when we deal with cumulative effect assessment. And you will see, you will come across a lot of other terminologies like apart from cumulative effect assessment, you would also come across cumulative impact assessment, CIA. And you will also come across cumulative effects assessment and management, CEAM as well. So they all will be more or less dealing with the same aspect, even if you come across different words. So looking at the purpose of CIA is you consider the incremental contribution of the project together with effects from the not just all the projects together, but you also look at the past, present, as well as you look at the future possible activities which will come up. So you have a complete assessment of what's really happening at that particular place. And with this, you might also realize that how complex it is and also what kind of methods might be involved, and currently it is said that the approaches are fairly inadequate. So today in this particular session we are going to cover, we're going to look into the definitions and concepts of cumulative effect assessment. So we'll be looking at what are the different concepts involved, the additive, synergetic effects, then what are the different perspectives involved in it related with valued ecosystem components, and we'll look at cumulative effects mechanism and typology involved in this. So that is what we'll cover within the definitions and concepts part. Then we'll look at certain key legislation and guidance, like what's the scenario with this at this moment, and then we'll look at the overall methodology, then we'll look at the scoping and baseline, the format which we have been following, and then we'll look at how we undertake prediction and evaluation, and then what is really done when we deal with cumulative effects, what kind of mitigation measures are taken. So we'll just look into the approach related with that. So accordingly, the learning outcome, the expected learning outcome would be that you should be able to define and explain certain concepts related with cumulative impact assessment and what is like additive or synergetic effects and so on. Further, you should be able to give a understanding on key legislation and guidance and what is the context at this moment, so that you should be able to explain. You should be able to synthesize the overall methodology which is involved and then identify key steps which one should take in scoping and baseline assessments, and then similarly you should be able to identify key methods used in prediction and evaluation and identify approaches used for mitigation purpose. So that is the learning outcomes expected from you after you complete this particular session. So looking into definitions and concepts, so looking at first what like cumulative, additive and synergetic effects are. So the like the impact on the environment which results from the incremental impact of the action when added to other past, present and reasonably foreseeable future actions. So that is what we call as cumulative. We are looking at the incremental, how slowly, gradually, what is happening to the environment given the what was past, what is the present, and what's going to happen in the future. And likewise, the definitions also say that cumulative impacts that results from incremental changes, what kind of changes are happening in the past, present, and what kind of change will happen in future when you take all of them together with the project. So that is what is said to be cumulative. So these are some of the definitions which you see. So cumulative impacts are those that arise from the successive, incremental and combined effects. So not just like taking it together, but in an incremental manner as well. And then also like how do you look at the combined effect, not only just one effect, but the other effects and together effects, what kind of effect would happen from the project and series of projects which might come in future as well. So that's what we talk about when we talk about cumulative impacts. So now looking at the additive effects, what's like additive effects, you might pay attention here. So it is the sum of magnitudes of the same effect. So when we say additive effects, so like whatever same effect, if we are dealing with noise, we are looking at in one particular context, we are looking at noise coming from one source and noise coming from the other source. So what's the combined effect of that particular effect on the overall environment? So that is what we mean when we say additive effect. So noise plus noise would the cumulative, the resultant effect which it would be called additive effects. Likewise, you see another term which is synergetic effect. So in this it's really difficult to recognize this, and it's also very complex to assess, evaluate this. But what conceptually it means is when there you have all the effects combined together, so that becomes a synergetic effects. Like noise coming from one place, dust coming from other place, and there is visual distortion in another. So that would be synergetic effects. So like with all kind of effects, how do you really get a sense of that particular place, what it really results into for that particular environment? That would mean synergetic effects. Further, we see that you will come across some more terms. You see it by IEMA. So it gives one term which is intra-projects effects. So these are effects which occur between different environmental topics within the same proposal. So within that same project itself, how different domain or effects deal with. So that is intra-project effects. And then you also have inter-project effects. So in this form of cumulative effect occurs as a result of likely impact of the proposed development interacting with the impacts of other development in the vicinity. So what happens from one project and what happens from the other project, and together how what's the results of all those impacts. So that's inter-project effects. Further, you can see indirect impact. So how we look at or differentiate with cumulative impact, or there might be overlapping understanding here. So impacts on the environment, which are not a direct results of the project, often produced away from or as a result of a complex pathway. So that is said to be an indirect impact, and sometimes referred to a second or third level impact or secondary impact as well. So that's indirect impact, and we had seen this in our initial lecture. And now seeing what is cumulative impact here, you can see the impact that results from incremental changes caused by the other past, present, or reasonably foreseeable action together with the project. So you see impact A, and impact A in future, and then from one development to the another development. So what's happening there? So you see that way. And then you also see impact interaction. So the reaction between impacts, whether between the impacts or just one project or between the impacts of the other projects in the area. So you see impact interaction, impact A, impact B causing impact C from development A and development B. So this is impact interaction. So now looking at another concept, key concept when we deal with cumulative impact assessment is valued ecosystem component. So you see that we have seen this valued ecosystem components before also. But here in context of cumulative impact assessment, our focus with cumulative impact assessment is on valued ecosystem components rather than on the project and its impact. Rather, we see what is really happening with valued ecosystem components, the ecosystem components which are valuable to the people with whom we are dealing with. Then there's another term which you see is the valued component. So here you see that it talks about, conceptually covers environmental features that may be affected by a project and that have been identified to be of concern by proponents, government agencies, Aboriginal people, or the public. So that's also said to be valued component. So you might find this term as well. So taken from the guideline here, so you see the difference between EIA and a cumulative impact assessment. So both share the same basic logical framework. So when you do EIA or cumulative impact assessment, both have the logical framework. It all proceeds in the same manner. And in the analytical process and tools also, same processes and tools are used while you do cumulative impact assessment. The difference, the key difference between EIA and cumulative impact assessment is of the perspective, how, from what side, what is a prime focus. So the difference is between the perspective. And we see that EIA is project center, so where we look at the project, and based on the project, we look at what impact it is going to happen. So our complete focus is on the project. And while we are looking at the impact, we see what impact it will have on the valued ecosystem components, VECs. So if there's a project, what will happen to the VECs? And then we try to mitigate it, and then we try to deal with all kind of residuals through the environmental management plans. So that is how we have been dealing with EIA. But what happens with cumulative? So in cumulative impact assessments, the focus is on valued ecosystem component. And here you see the area considered is the area in which the value ecosystem component is there. So our focus is on VECs, which is where other stresses because of the development, human activity, for all these may affect them. So we focus on the recipient more than the project. So once the other impacts have been identified, the cumulative impacts are assessed as resulting change in the condition of VEC. So we try to see what's really happening with the VEC rather than trying to see with the project. We here in cumulative impact assessment try to see what's happening to VEC because of project 1, project 2, project 3, human activities, natural environment, drivers and stress. From all perspective, what's really happening to VEC. So that's what is the key difference between cumulative assessment. So further you see in the similar line, IFC tells there are two components to cumulative impact assessment. So one is about anticipated future conditions, like what's really going to happen, which is the total effect of the other existing and what is there and what is going to happen, and also the external natural environment and the social drivers, just now what you saw in the diagram. So that's the first stage, first component of cumulative impact assessment. And the other component is the contribution of the development under evaluation to the cumulative impact. So whatever project you are doing, what is the contribution of that development into the cumulative impact, what you are evaluating. So overall thing, what is happening to VEC plus how your project is going to impact or change, positive or negative change to the overall what's happening to that particular VEC. So that was about definitions. Now looking at some of the mechanism and typology. So looking at the mechanism which causes cumulative effects, they are put into categories in a number of different ways according to the spatial and temporal attributes. So the typology of cumulative effects, which incorporates temporal or spatial attributes, we can see some of the typologies here. So you see we have partially covered before as well. You may recollect that. So you see the typology, cumulative effects mechanism here. So one is time crowding, which means that in a way it occurs in time, like the kind of frequency with which it occurs, repetitive or simultaneously effects on the environmental sources. So if there are noise happening from all the sources at the same time, so that's a piling noise. And then in terms of time lag, it's like long delay between cause and effects. So like in a cumulative manner, you can have sediment degradation effects which are worsened by the climate change. So all that can be considered within the time lag. Then you see space crowding, if you can recollect, high spatial density of effects on an environmental system. Then you can see that there are a lot of things in the same place. So that's said to be the space crowding. Then you have cross-boundary movement. So effects occur some distance away from the source. So what's really happening at the project site or beyond the project site. So impacts on the migratory birds, impacts on the migratory marine mammals. Then you have another mechanism which you see, fragmentation, change in the landscape or seascape pattern. So we had talked about fragmentations also, how they get fragmented. So habitat fragmentations of fisheries and so on. And then you also see the triggers. So the fundamental changes in the system, behavior or structure. So it triggers those behavior and the behavior changes. So you have like you lose those VECs because of the certain kind of changes. So that is what is called about triggers. Then the nibbling. Nibbling is about incremental or decreasing effects. So gradual loss of natural areas at project margins, permanent increments, effects of scar, and then reduction in species density and so on. So that typology you can see here: time crowding, time lag, space crowding, cross-boundary movement, fragmentation, triggers, nibbling. So that was about typology of cumulative effects. It was very specific to the wind farm project. There can be these examples were specific to that. Now, looking at the key legislation and guidance. So, in Indian context, we do not find that being currently implemented through the legislative tools, but there are a lot of debate and discourse going on. However, we see that European Union has EIA directives, which defines it and also makes it inclusive in the project, and also identifies those kind of context which lead to assessment of cumulative effects. So likewise, you also see in USA also, they have addressed in their environmental impact statement itself within their NEPA. So within that itself, they have recognized cumulative effects, and then they have described that it should be included in the process. Then you also see in Canada, they have assessment of cumulative effects, which has to be undertaken. It is specified in the Act, and then the Act requires EIA to take into account any cumulative effects that are likely to arise from the designated project in combination with other physical activities that have been or will be carried out. So Canada has that in their legislation. So that's very briefly about the key legislations here. Looking at the guidance and standards, so there are a lot of guidance and standards which are available. So you can see IFC has given guidance. Then you can also see here Cumulative Effects Assessment Practitioners Guide by Government of Canada. I have also given you the link so that you can browse through this. Then you can also find sectorial based guidelines which are given. Here you can see for the renewable energy cumulative impact assessment guidelines is very detailed guidelines. You can see how cumulative impact assessment has to be undertaken for offshore wind farms. So if you are interested in this particular domain, you can look at it, but it also helps you to see how cumulative impact assessment is undertaken. So you can see another guideline which is by Marine Management Organization. I have given you the link here, which gives you a framework for how to undertake scoping to identify cumulative effects. So you can see here within their content, they have talked about how they have explained cumulative effect, and then they have talked about for a marine management organization how you take care of different requirements with that, and then how you take care of database within this, and then what kind of approach you adopt and the framework used for this particular area. So you'll also find another toolkit, practical toolkit for assessing cumulative effects of spatial plans and development project on biodiversity in England. I have given you the link for downloading here. So you can see that it defines the cumulative effect. It tells you about the key cumulative effects which should be considered in case of biodiversity. And then you can see how you take care of spatial plans, what stages you follow, and then it gives you all range of how do you assess cumulative effects. So these guidelines are available for domain specific areas. Then you also find sample guidelines on cumulative environmental impact assessment for hydropower projects, and this is from the context of Turkey, and this guideline is developed by World Bank, so you can see that. And I've also given you the link here, and then you can see again how do they define cumulative impacts here, and then what kind of key task you have to undertake while you do the cumulative assessments. So, like from scoping, baseline studies, and mitigation measures, evaluations of significance, monitoring, and follow up. So, how you will undertake all of these with when you're dealing with hydropower projects. So, you can refer to this also. And then there's another guidance which is available on cumulative impacts. You can see here how they are giving in terms of this one is related with Australian context, and it's related with coal mining industry. So you can see how they are defining cumulative impact, and then how do you assess cumulative impacts. So all that is given. I've also given you the link so that you can download the document. Further, you can see another framework for understanding cumulative impacts. And then how do you really make decision with regards to this is case coming from Great Barrier Reef, World Heritage Area. So how do you undertake that? You can have a skim through table of contents. You see they have given you framework, structure, approach, methodology, as well as they have given you what is what are the risks involved here, and then you look at various models which are available for usage for this particular domain and assessment. How do you undertake assessment of cumulative impacts? And then they are also using zone of influence, which we have already studied, and then also estimating cumulative risk to ecosystem values. And they have also identified zones of consequences, so you can see all that here. Then you also see another guidelines, which is by Natural England Commission. So you see development of generic framework for informing cumulative assessment related to marine protected area through evaluation of best practice. So you can also see how they give you the process, entire process, and the details are given. And then there's another guideline you can see, mini review of current practice and assessment of cumulative environmental effect of UK offshore renewable energy developments. And then you can see here that is also given. You can also find another by European Commission. Here it gives you guidelines for assessment of indirect and cumulative impact as well as impact interaction. So it also gives you a very thorough guidance in this area, and it specifically deals with assessment. So those are the guidance which are available, so you can see through those how different stages can be done. So now very briefly looking into the overall methodology. So here I have taken from the guidelines for the assessment of indirect and cumulative impact from the European Commission guideline, which I just showed you. So you can see here how the overall framework is. So if you see here, you have seen that majorly the first stage is scoping and identification of impact, and then you do the assessment and evaluation of impacts. So here you see in the scoping and identification of impacts, you see different during the scoping you have to take care of, you have to take inputs, you have to consult different stakeholders. So you have a consultation process in which you use the tools like questionnaire, checklist, then you also do undertake spatial analysis, and you can also have network and system analysis. You can also undertake expert and matrix analysis. So these methods and tools are available. And then based on this, what kind of information would be required to you for undertaking this is like you would need project specific information, like what's the nature of the project, what's the scale of the project, phasing, layout, emissions, ancillary, and then you would also need the receiving environment baseline. So this is what is unique here, what you see here, set of geographical and time frame, determining the data required, collection data, identify sensitive areas, identify carrying capacity. So carrying capacity becomes one key element here. Consider influence or the other activities, and identify network and systems within receiving environment. So you undertake that within the scoping, and then assessment and evaluation impact, so you will see that expert and matrix are falling in both the categories. So that's not a very strict line here, you see. So for assessment and evaluation, you can use expert matrix as well as modeling and carrying threshold analysis. So you know that how much is really more and how much is less. And then for this, what kind of information you need is duration of impact, extent, frequency, value and resilience, influence of the past, trends in the environment, and how can impact be handled, and what kind of mitigations have to be taken, and what kind of how you're going to report it. So all this is given in this particular guideline as well, and we have been discussing all this. So looking at scoping and baseline. So this is as per the IFC document. You see scoping they have identified two phases in the scoping when we deal with it, and then the prime objective, why we do scoping and what things we need to take care when we are dealing with cumulative effects. So the prime purpose is to identify and like agree on the VECs in consultation with the stakeholders. So there can be many VECs, or which VECs you will really pick up, or have you come up with the right VECs, or have you identified the right VECs or not. So that is what you need to ensure during the scoping stage of one. And then you also need to determine the time frame for the analysis, how much time you have, and establish the geographical scale of the analysis. So when you saw cumulative, you said past, present, and future. So you need to define how much future and how much past you're going to take, and then how much geographical area you're going to take, because we are talking about not just one project, but a range of projects and range of activities. So you might have to define a boundary, geographical boundary, for which you're going to work. So for this, you have they have given range of questions for which you should look answers to. So whose involvement is key? So you need to find out who are the stakeholders which are important for your thing, important for your understanding and findings, and then which VEC resources, ecosystem, or human values are affected. So you need to identify them, and then are there concerns from existing cumulative impacts. So that you need to see. And then again, you see that from the sample guidelines, what they talk about scoping of cumulative impact, you can see this says that in the scoping stage, you need to define the project activities. So you need to tell what's going to happen in your project activities. And then you need to do the identification of area of influence. So you need to find out how much area you're going to take, and then which VECs you're going to cover. And then you need to find out the past, present, and future activities, and not all the activities, but the activities which will be affecting the VECs, and then identification of project-specific standards. So related with that, what standards will be involved. So this is as per the sample guidelines. Likewise, you see from the technical guidance, they give another layout framework for how you should approach cumulative effect assessment. So you see that identifying VCs are very important here, valued component, and then whether there is residual environmental effects to the VCs from the designated project, no, then you can VC is not identified for the cumulative effects if the answer is no. But if it is yes, then VC is identified for the cumulative effects assessment, and you have to gather information on the VC, and then you need to further take it, like what will be the geographical boundary, what will be the temporal boundary, and what will be the physical activities involved. And then you will look at whether VC will be affected by all of these. If yes, then you need to move to the step 2. If not, you can wind up there. So in this, if you look at the step 1 and step 2, you see that this toolkit provides you 2 stage, and the checklist has like questions like, has the likely content of the project and the geographical extent been described in sufficient detail to allow general conclusion, what types of cumulative effects that could arise in this particular zone, and then could these cumulative effects be significant, and the scoping report has been provided or not. Then likewise you see the stage 2 scoping assessments, where you look have all the potential types of cumulative effects have been identified or not, spatial temporal scales have been addressed or not, ecological features have been addressed or not. So all that has to be seen, and how evolution of ecological features have been through, and then you also need to see process for assessing the likely cumulative effects. So what process you're going to adopt, that all needs to be decided here. So you see that scoping and baseline deals with like you find out what are the key effects, what are the key VECs, and then you will also notice that a lot of back and forth work has to be done. So you need to, when you're preparing something for scoping, you need to define what does cumulative effects mean in your context. So all the range of guidelines which we were seeing, all the sectorial guidelines we were seeing, everyone was defining cumulative effects. So it might slightly be the conceptually it might be same, but it might be very much specific as per the different sectors. So you need to define cumulative effects with when you're dealing with it, and then also define the temporal and spatial limit. So I've got the example here. I'm also giving you the link to the journal article from which you can see. So you can see the spatial outlook here, and even if you read the map, and you can see the red study area boundary. And all the dots, you can see the projects considered in the study. So you can see 0.5, 0.9, 0.8, 0.1, 0.7, 0.10, 0.2. So you see how many projects they have considered within this study area. So you see that this is how one example indicates how the range of projects are taken. And you see they identified the valued environmental social components here, and then you see how they are looking at air quality, water resource, natural vegetation, public roads, natural and cultural heritage, and why they have taken it up. Likewise, you can see how they are doing assessment temporal wise, the baseline, what's in current stage, what will happen in future emission, and then they are trying to take out the likely trends. You can see air quality, current stage trend, likely future state. So you can see red is indicating bad. Trend, the arrow down is showing decrease. So current state is regular, but you can see the trend is decreasing, and likely future state is red. It's going to be bad for air quality. So that is how they are undertaking it. So here in the example, you can see again from this practical toolkit I have taken how they are looking at the geographical boundaries, and how from various projects how they would then integrate, merge together, and find out a common boundary. So while you're doing this, there's you have to take care of a reasonably foreseeable future project. So how much really you can cover future projects. So you need to look at that. So you need to take help from the stakeholders and the authorities there, which would really have impact on the VEC. So you cannot really take all the future projects, but the projects which are likely to impact your VECs, you might only take that, and you might also consult with the authorities in this regard. So there's also concept of physical proximity of other actions which have to be taken into the project. So while you're looking at it, you need to look at you need to see source pathway receptor reasoning. So you see how it happens. We have studied about this source pathway receptor before. So what's the source, from where the impact is transferring, and then who's the end receptor of it. So you need to see that while you look at the proximity, physical proximity, or define the geographical area. And then you also need to look at the sensitive receptors. So you need to take care of that, and then also the threshold value. Further, you need to look at the all these you need to undertake based on the evidences. So what data tells, on that basis you're going to look at it. So what all areas you would cover would depend on that. So for all these, you need to take judgment for the context and situation. So you see that whenever you're doing cumulative impact assessment, it needs to be proportionate. You should be focusing on the key effects, and then you should look at the sensitive receptors. So that was about the scoping. Further, moving on to prediction and evaluation. There are certain methods for assessing indirect and cumulative impact and impact interaction. This I've taken from the guidelines for the assessment from the European Commission. You can see the methods involved are expert opinion, where you take inputs from the expert, and then there are certain advantages and disadvantages of all these methods, but I'm not going to get into that. Then you have consultation and questionnaire methods also, which allows you to be really flexible and consider potential impact very early in the stage. Then you have checklist methods and spatial analysis, where you can use GIS. So all these methods can be used. Then you also have network and system analysis. Then you also have matrices, which can be used here. So all these for the purpose of assessment. Then you can also look at the carrying capacity analysis, and then for the higher assessment, you can also do modeling, which can help you to quantify the cumulative effects, and then you can also have the geographical extent and the time frame also, and you can see for different scenarios. So those all are available to you. So looking at the prediction and evaluation, how do we really evaluate the impact is significant or not? So there is one, you see the proximate cause test of significance. So you can put this test across. So this, what does this test means? Proximate cause test. Proximate cause test for effect prediction is based on the basic concepts, which is like proximate cause. And what do we see proximate cause means? It's an act for which an injury results as a natural, direct, uninterrupted consequences, and without which the injury would not have occurred. So that's a proximate cause. So if that act is going to happen, it is going to lead to injury, result into natural or direct or uninterrupted consequences. So that is proximate cause. So you see that you have a three-phase procedure for that. So first you determine whether a proposal would proximately cause a significant effect on the given resource. Second, you investigate how the affected environment has reached its current conditions and projected like what's really going on. Then you determine what happens to the conditions and trends of the resources. So what will really happen? So that is how you decide whether the proposal has likelihood of that happening, and why that condition is there, and then what will happen to that. So based on that, you evaluate the significance. Then moving on to mitigation. So this is cumulative. So the mitigation approach will be very different here. So here you would see, because no one particular project is taking care of the mitigation. So mitigation should be proportionate to the nature of cumulative effects. And then some of the measures, very exemplary measures, include reducing the constructions and operational aspects of development. So number of development projects which are happening, they might need to be reduced. And then how they might, you might also need measures to manage the effects, and also restricting the extent of the proposed project. So how much restrictions you put on the proposed project. So the key impact aspect here is that you also need to create headroom, means some space between what will happen, it's all the effects which are going to happen. Then you should have certain head space for safety provision. If there is air pollution which is going to happen, so you should not try to have it to the maximum level, but you should keep certain headroom, so that whenever things come in a cumulative manner, you have space to accommodate all kind of variations. So that one is needed. Certain examples of mitigation include, especially one case from the Canada is like wildlife management programs, compensation measures, monitoring programs, and then also how you can deal with particular programs. So all these programs can come here. The other is like you can deal with master planning process, where you have a master plan process, you know the threshold, you know the carrying capacity, and you know the impact of it. So you, within the master planning process, you try to curtail these things. And then you can also have hierarchy of mitigations. So that also it talks about it's important to share information, exchange information, create information. That could be the first step. Then you can have common sources, resources where you can deal with, and then you can take proactive management of timing and location of the development. So by staggering it, how you will manage it, that way you can manage all these problems as well. And then another important aspect is monitoring and management. So it's very important that when cumulative impact will happen in a significant manner, then you need to monitor and manage it well. And one needs to compliance by the thing, by what facts and standards have to be adopted there. So that is what we have seen here. So we'll wind up here. So summarizing what we studied today. So we looked at definitions and concepts related with cumulative impact. Then we looked at key legislation and what's the context scenario about cumulative impact, and then we looked at the overall methodology. We looked at what are the key aspects you need to take care in scoping and baseline, and then how do you undertake prediction and evaluation, and then what really you do in the mitigation measures. So these mitigations are really different from what other mitigations you undertake. So this was the key reference in this particular session, and these are the suggested watch and read. And winding up, please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about any concerns you have. Do share your opinions, experiences, and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring EIA. Thank you.